Good evening. Minister Ardon, Ambassador Shapiro, Professor Reichman, Mr. Shavit, Assistant Secretary General of the Board, Professor Ganor, friends. It's both an honor and a privilege to speak at tonight's memorial. First of all, I would like to express how thankful I am for the opportunity to be here in Israel and part of this institution as a U.S. Army Fellow. The amount of counterterrorism expertise gathered in one place is absolutely amazing. The warmth and friendship my family and I have experienced thus far has been overwhelming. Shortly after arriving at the ICT, Professor Ganor asked me to speak during this memorial. When I first looked at the list of speakers and the attendees for tonight's event, I was humbled. Today, 9/11, Americans and our friends gather in the United States and in far-flung places throughout the world to remember the victims of those terrible attacks. We also remember those people who have given their lives since then as we continue the fight against those who would seek to destroy our way of life. 15 years ago to the day, nearly 3,000 civilians, firefighters, police, and service members were killed in the horrific terrorist attacks in New York City, at the Pentagon, and aboard Flight 93. Unfortunately, many others have suffered since as terrorist attacks continue throughout the world. I'm sure all of us here remember what they were doing that fateful Tuesday morning on 11 September of 2001, and I am no different. My story is not thrilling. I did not experience the attacks firsthand, nor did I have family at the World Trade Center, but yet the effects of that day have indeed changed how I have lived my life and how I see the world today. On September 11th of 2001, I was a captain already in the Army. At that time, I was away from home and in training. I was away from outside information, a bit hungry, and overly tired. I remember vividly when they gathered our group in a room at the conclusion of our training evolution and informed us of the events that had occurred earlier in the day. I remember when they rolled out a giant television and turned on the evening news broadcast for us to watch. My first thought was that there was no way this could have happened and that this was all part of a training scenario. Unfortunately, as the news continued, it became painfully clear that a calculated attack had truly occurred. I, like many others around me, was confused and angry at the events. Then I remember my heart sinking for my friends as the cadre collected the names of those who had loved ones in the affected areas. And although I knew my family was not in harm's way, I could not help but be concerned for my son and my wife, who at the time was 9 months pregnant with our daughter. A few weeks later, I was able to speak with my wife for the first time after the attacks. It was during this phone call, about an hour or so after our daughter was born, that I believe we both realized, when it first truly sank in, that the world we would be raising our family in would not be the same place we both knew growing up in Middle America. It would not be the same because terrorism does not discriminate by age. 9/11 took the lives of people from as young as 2 and as old as 82. The attacks did not discriminate against nationality. Some 372 souls had citizenship ties to 90 nations other than the United States. The effects of the attack did not end at the conclusion of the evening news cycle. The fires at Ground Zero burned for 99 days afterwards, and truckload after truckload moved through the streets of New York as they cleared 2 million tons of debris from Ground Zero. Today, the rubble is replaced with the One World Trade Center, or the Freedom Tower. The streets of New York are bustling. The Pentagon is repaired, and the business of keeping our nation strong echo throughout the hallways. The United States Army has grown and adapted to meet the unique challenges on the battlefield, and today the Army continues to transform and adapt to counter the threat of violent extremism. And now, as a nation, we mark September 11th as a national day of service and remembrance. We do this not only to remember the past, but to focus on making tomorrow better. We remember those who were lost, yet we admire the individual acts of courage of that day, especially from those aboard Flight 93 and that of those first responders. We remain amazed at the resiliency of the people and our nation, but what we cannot forget is that our children have been forced to grow up in a world where terrorism is an ever-looming factor within their life. There's not a day that goes by where terrorism is not mentioned in the news, mentioned in their classrooms, or just in casual conversation, a true tragedy within itself. Over the past 15 years, I have attended 11 9/11 memorial events outside the borders of the United States. I've always been thankful to see our friends and allies take a moment to remember those who lost their lives on that day, as well as the soldiers, colleagues, and friends who have paid the ultimate sacrifice at the hands of terrorists. Today, I am equally grateful to everyone here in ensuring that this day does not pass without a moment of reflection for those who have suffered from terrorist acts. Not only the 9/11 attacks, but those which have occurred throughout the world. The struggle to combat terrorism in every nation continues, as well as the struggle to make this world a better place for our children and grandchildren. And as long as people seek to achieve their goals through violence, I know that good people throughout this world will continue to dedicate their effort and lives to stop it. Thank you, and may we always keep those who are still grieving in our thoughts and prayers.